Okay, Leon Conrad is an independent researcher and writer, author of Story and Structure, a Complete Guide, published through Aladdin Publishing, the Squeeze Press in 2022. The first successful comprehensive mapping of the calculations in George Spencer Brown's Laws of Form to the analysis of story structure. Leon is the founder and lead trainer at the Academy of Oratory, tutor at the Academy of Oratory, tutor at the Traditional Tutor, and orator in residence at the Next Society Institute. Any information you would like about him, you may visit his website at leonconrad.com. And again, Leon is joining us from London, England. Thank you so much for your patience and putting up with my technological lack of prowess.
You're fine.
I'm going to turn the lights off so we can see you a little bit better, but as soon as you're ready, Leon, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you for having me here. It's a great honor to share my work with you and a great pleasure to be among such erudite and insightful presentations so far. My contribution to this panel on protagonists and antagonists is to do with looking at the relationship between protagonists and antagonists and exploring what that might have to do with the relation between angels and demons, or the angelic and demonic. Both pairs show a binary relationship, a binary oppositional relationship. And the question I want to place today before you is why? Why is it that they form such an important part of story and how story works? My approach is based on the analysis of story structure as outlined in my book. And in it, I trace the patterns that story structures follow at the time of the tale. So at the level of fabula, not at the level of the time of the telling or at the level of sujet. I won't go into the methodology in detail here. I will, however, use the methodology to cast light on how binary opposition plays out very frequently in stories. If we look at the pair protagonist-antagonist, we find a classic tetralemma structure. 4 options or outcomes that emerge from the conflict binary oppositional relationship. In the first 2, one or other of the characters will be victorious. In the third, both will be victorious and not victorious. In the fourth option, neither will be either victorious or not victorious. The first 2 are quite easy. It's win-lose for whichever of the parties comes out on top. The third is perhaps the most interesting, where both parties are both winners and losers. And the story structures I've found that link to this follow 3 distinct dimensions of being: the physical, the cosmic, and the mythic. At the physical level, we have what I call the trickster structure. This will be familiar to you with some trickster tales, and the basic pattern is that one character dupes the other character finds out, wants vengeance, wants to seek revenge, and sets out to turn the tables on the other character. At the end, if they're successful, the status quo resets. They're back where they started. Nothing really changes. Many Anansi stories follow this. Many Brer Rabbit stories follow this structure. Mullah Nasruddin or Goha or Hodja stories in the Middle East, and Tom and Jerry cartoons follow the structure. At the cosmic level, we have stories that follow what I call the perpetual motion structure. These stories typically highlight either cosmic cycles or planetary movements, or cycles of life and death. The story of the moon and his 2 wives illustrates the phases of the moon, waxing and waning of the moon, or songs like Where Have All the Flowers Gone highlight cycles of life and death. On the mythic level, The call and response structure is perhaps the most interesting. It has as a central theme a sense of an excessive state of imbalance. And there's an attempt to restore balance. The attempt is very often excessive. It typically has to do with a link and a relationship between the world of motion, the world of mortals, and the world of the immortals, the transcendent and immanent dimensions of being. And on the transcendent level of being, gods very often follow a particular story structure, which is the most compressed and the most impressive story structure I've found. It's very short. You'll know it from the stories of Ovid's Metamorphoses, where a god sees something that's wrong and just intervenes, and boom, the transformation is sudden. There is no rational process, and a change happens that restores balance, but nothing is ever as it was. Things are changed irrevocably. What I've noticed by analysing these stories is there is a link between the two dimensions of being. An excess of good brings about the demonic, and an excess of evil brings about the angelic. Some examples. At the beginning of the story of Beowulf, Hrothgar builds an excessively good mead hall, Heorot. As a result, that brings Grendel the monster out of hiding, and he wreaks havoc. On the other side, in the Baha'i faith, what brings about the angelic revelation to Baha'u'llah but his incarceration in the deep, dark pit of Tehran, the foulest place on earth at the time? The structure very often has a triple lead up to the Big Bang at the end, or it comes away from it. The fourth option is where neither of the two characters end up winners or losers. Where the conflict is unresolved, you get a tragic trickster structure. Where it is resolved, I'd argue that is a story structure that follows a koan that leads to enlightenment. And when you come out of that state of enlightenment, I think the story structure we are called to follow is a structure I call the creation myth structure. It just flows forward. There is no impediment to flow. The flow is uninterrupted. It's the story structure that the creation story in Genesis 1 follows, where there is no problem. It's not that God looks around and sees there's darkness and says, oh, we need a bit of light. He says, no, let there be light, and there was light. And so it flows on. These story structures show us three things. One, story is life, life story. Where do story structures come from? They come from in and from consciousness. They are one and the same. Story and life. Two, binaries can be held in harmonious balance. And three, conflict exists as a marker of an absence of flow. And that's where I'll stop and hopefully open up some comments and questions for discussion.
Thank you so much, Leon.